As the Pact prepares for war against Morgemoth, heroes unite in a mysterious land to hold the line against the Elder Dragon's encroaching forces. But as secrets are revealed, will Tyrians find hope, or only come to understand that the road to war is paved with points of no return? Dun dun dun! Hello everybody! Today we're going to be going on a bit of a bonanza. It's patch day, it's the long-awaited return of the living world, starting with the first release, Echoes of the Past. I've spent a great deal of time playing this patch, so I have a lot of information to share with you guys. In this video I'm going to give you a general overview of what has changed with Guild Wars 2, completely spoiler-free, my general impressions of the patch as objectively as I can look at it. So first of all, I'll say this patch is something you are going to love if you are super into the universe, if you're really into the lore of Guild Wars. And I'm not talking just about story, I'm not talking about do you love Bram and Rox and all the stuff with Scarlet and Living World in general. I'm saying if you love the lore, if you love the world, this patch will be phenomenal for you. I spent many hours in sheer joy and adoration at what the devs have put into the game. I will say a fair few times throughout the content I've created for this patch that it feels very much as though whoever is in charge of the living world right now has suddenly remembered that this is Guild Wars and that this is Tyria, and they remembered what the first game was. It was like they replayed through the first game, looked at all their old mysteries, tiny little things to reference, and much of it has been mentioned. And not just the first game, but the second game too. Huge plot points like Traherne's magical sword, Khaled Bolg, supposedly instrumental in tackling Elder Dragons, the airship we used to destroy Zaitan, the glory of Tyria, and many more things are actually being referenced in this patch. It's not some self-contained living world story that feels a bit out of place from everything else. It feels like Guild Wars 2, and for that reason, I am overjoyed. However, I do have to step back and appreciate that some people aren't super into the story, whether they never fell in love with it in the first place, or they've just decided not to pay much attention to the living world plot itself. And for those people, for those of you who aren't going to stop and listen to the NPCs and check every single person you can interact with and marvel at all the papers lining the walls showing intricate diagrams of packed machinery, translatable war plans, and general nuggets of information, if you're not a player that's going to indulge yourself in that stuff, I would say this patch could fly by rather quickly. And I do believe that this patch is at risk, as many patches have been that they've put out before, of being one that people say, oh, I just played the game for an hour and put the game down again. It's not enough content. It doesn't hold my attention for long enough. And to those people, who I do think will have a fairly valid opinion, I would just slightly encourage you and say that now, if you're ever going to start paying attention to the story, now is probably a really good time to do it, because the quality of the story in this patch is so on point. The references that they make and the mysteries they elaborate on, the exposition they give on things you should be paying attention to, is so far unparalleled. It is one of the best story patches we have ever had for Guild Wars 2. And if now you do decide, right, I am going to try and listen to the story, you'll probably get a lot more out of the patch. I would also say it's probably unfair to judge the size of the patch based purely on how long it can take you to complete the story, because yes, this is a living world update. It comes with a few more missions for us to play through, but it also introduces another new map to the game. The new map is called the Silverwastes, and it is through this new map that I believe we will get most of our replayable content. The story, yes, is fun. The story, yes, you can spend a lot of time on if you're really into the lore, but ultimately we are going to be finished with it, right? At that point, I believe the devs are expecting us to most focus on the new map, the Silverwastes, which is doing a lot of new mechanical things we haven't really seen in the franchise before. Now, as much as I'd love to tell you guys, this is an amazing map, it's got all this incredible replayable stuff, the gameplay is phenomenal, I can't honestly make that statement to you. While I've played the patch, I haven't played it in an environment with tons of players, and this is very much content that benefits most from having large groups of players, guilds working organized together, or just casual map chat commanders trying to get things done. Because it's largely just been me running around on my own while testing this patch out, I can't say how well the map will scale up to lots of people, but from what I have observed, it does look very interesting. The map is basically a giant war zone that has been designed to take significant advantage of the way dynamic events work. This is, if you think about it, something ArenaNet were trying to do at the launch of the game with the way that ore worked. In the perfect world, how do you guys imagine ore to have functioned? Some immense push-pull battle that the players have to really commit to cut their way through hordes of Orions before they finally reach Ara, right? But we never quite got that experience. Everything was quite rudimentary. It was, okay, this location, this camp is either in favor of the Pact or it is in favor of the Risen. Only one of these two factions can hold it, and you get a basic event to capture it from the Risen and a basic event to defend it from the Risen. And that's pretty much the way that all worked. With the Silverwastes, this new map that is roughly, I would say, 2/3 the size of Drytop, the devs have taken this idea of players fighting over territory against enemies and upped the ante. Locations you hold as players can be upgraded in various ways. Their walls will be destroyed and have to be manually repaired by players who search the area for rubble and building materials to actually do it. Supply caravans will be constantly pushing out from one end of the map, attempting to resupply these forts. Should players not defend the supply caravans, they will die. Pact-held locations in deeper Mordrum territory will be cut off from their supplies, they'll be starved out, and ultimately fall once again. There's a giant map-wide meta event that it's up to the players to continue pushing and help the Pact own the entire map. And if this doesn't sound very good already, they've been very intelligent with the way the Mordrim will actually assault objectives, as opposed to what we saw in Ore, where again things were very basic. If you held a location in Ore, the Risen would attack it and they would basically just spawn in long waves that kept coming, and a Zerg of players could just AoE them down. There would be no interest there. All the locations in the Silverwastes can be assaulted from multiple angles. The Mordrim will flank players. They will set up assault forces that don't just Zerg in mindlessly to get AoE'd down. They'll build siege outside of your locations, forcing you to push out there and destroy their siege before they just destroy all of your walls for free. Another minor thing that ArenaNet have improved on is in Ore, for the Risen to capture a location from players, they would have to be stood in a circular territory that appears when the event gets to that point. Should a single human player in Ore stay inside one of those territories, the Risen could never capture it from them. The result was it's incredibly easy in Ore to never have the Risen capture locations back from the Pact. Even if you can't fight the easily dismissed waves of enemies, you could just cheese it out by standing in these capture point territories. Now, in the Silverwastes, the objective is to protect a key NPC in the center of your location, and if they are not healed, if enemies around them are not CC'd, blinded, killed quick enough, that NPC will die and the location will immediately flip. On top of this, they've layered other mechanics such as calling in airships for airstrikes. I'll talk a lot more in greater detail about these mechanics in another video. You can click an annotation on the screen to take you to it. I do a full immersive tour of the Silverwastes, talk a lot more about the lore of the map and how many of these new mechanics work. It's a beautiful map graphically. In theory, the mechanics I'm seeing that they've put in here should hold up very well, but I personally haven't experienced it at the Zerg level, so I can't comment too much on that just yet. So, going back to what I was saying before, I do think the patch has a lot to offer players, especially if the Silverwastes themselves do scale up very nicely. And do try to remember that every moment you spend in the Silverwastes, every moment you now spend in Drytop after the story came out, is still entertainment you're getting out of the patch. I don't think we can quite say, oh, I only played it for half an hour, if yes, the story took you half an hour, and then you spent 200 hours grinding on some of the rewards in this new map. Not to say the story itself is genuinely half an hour. I think if you rush past it, you really don't give a crap about any story, you skip everything. It's probably still about an hour to an hour and a half, about on par with what we've seen in previous updates. It's just there's a lot more you can do on the side. The story itself is of an incredibly high quality. I won't spoil anything for you guys, but here's some of the things that they reference in this patch, okay? I'm not going to tell you if they're important to the patch, but whether they are referenced or mentioned, okay? The Brotherhood of the Dragon, Ogden's Stonehealer, Glint's Lair, Abaddon, the Zephyrite, and the current whereabouts of the Master of Peace, Khalidbolg, Traherne's magical sword, why the Maguma jungle dried up and died in the first place. Can we attribute this specifically to Morgemoth or something else? The Rites of Ascension in Guild Wars 1 are referenced. Old Ascalonian runes, a language that the devs seem to have forgotten they once created, are used in this patch. The Glory of Tyria, the airship we used to destroy Zaitan, is in this patch. There are writings of the White Mantle, of the Shining Blade. There are translatable documents talking about the Bloodstones. And most importantly, there is a a giant library you will eventually visit in the story with tons of readable lore books based on the Guild Wars universe and mysteries that are currently set up, that show us not just old mysteries the devs still want us to think about, but actually give us new lore, new interpretations of the universe, and much more. Again, just like I have a tour of the Silverwastes, I have a tour of this library too. I know it may sound like that's spoilerish, but really has nothing to do with the main living world plot of this patch, and I very much encourage you guys to check that tour out, because not only will I go through the books there for you, I will explain exactly who wrote the books and the stories that they're based on. That should be very useful for those of you who never played the first game, which is referenced so heavily in this patch, I can't even begin to talk about it. Alright, so that's the patch in broad terms. Let's talk more specifically. Why would we even want to do the story? Why would we want to do the Silverwastes? What are the rewards? So there's 2 new armor sets being added to the game, and slowly these will unlock for us as this second half of Season 2 unfolds. So for this patch we get the shoulders. The 2 new armor sets are Carapace and then Luminescent armor. And the way that this works is you actually upgrade the Carapace armor, which has a unique skin of its own, into Luminescent armor through, I believe it's with the collections in this patch. Ultimately you're going to do that. Yes, there are new collections. Now that collections are a thing since Feature Pack 2, they're going to be consistently added with these new patches. We even saw them in Halloween. I do think they're strong additions to the game. There is a new version of the buried locked chests we found in Drytop, though the sandstorm mechanic is slightly different, but these new chests will give us more new stuff. There's an endless Dustmite tonic. Think of this akin to the endless Monkey King tonic. There's also an endless Arid Devourer tonic that can come from these chests, and a new set of high-level bandit weapons that you can choose the stats you specifically want on them, and yes, they have their own collection. Beyond this, there is a new stat set and crafting line being added to the game called the Sinister Stat Set. That is very difficult to say. So if you remember with Drytop, we got Nomad's Gear. This was them finally giving us a pure tank set. Well, they're giving us a pure offensive Condi set this patch. This could actually change quite a few things, not necessarily for like dungeon meta in the game, but quite a few things elsewhere. This is something many people have wanted. Before this patch in Guild Wars 2, if you wanted to play a condition-based character, they were always forcing you with the stat sets to have some kind of defense in there. Well, now the Sinister set is pure Condi, so it is Condi damage main stat, power minor, and precision minor. I'm definitely getting this for my engineer, and the ascended version of it is called Verata, Verata being a prominent necromancer from the first game. That should be exciting to people. Not every player, of course, is going to want that new stat set, but if you do want to go for that, if you want to go for your pure Zerk kind of Condi guy, that means you're going to spend a lot of time in the new map, hopefully enjoying these new dynamic events. Moving on from rewards, general changes that also occurred to the game were kind of minor. There was more skill shaving though, which I'm happy to see. They should do this pretty much every patch. I'd be much more happy, not just on feature packs. So the elementalist skills that you can pop from your summons are now instant activation. I can't understand why they weren't instant activation with the original patch. It actually made them worse, where you had to cast them and then you had to wait for your elemental to try and cast them, and then the elemental actually had to cast them. There was just such an immense delay, especially on a class where you're constantly trying to rotate attunements and there's always a better cooldown for you to be using. It was just painful. So they're now instant activation. Engineers have had skill cooldowns dropped on quite a few things. Magnetic shield can now be used while moving. I believe that's the 4 on their shield, which is pretty interesting. The Guardian has had a couple of changes. The most interesting one to me, though, was that Bane Signet, their power signet, now actually has a bit more incentive to pop. It's got a 3-second knockdown, and that's a very long knockdown for this game. Over with the Necromancers, there was a bug where recently they enabled you to stomp and res people in Death Shroud, except it would accidentally cancel these skills on quite a few occasions. That has been fixed, I'm very happy about. And they're trying to incentivize a little bit more healing power use, a little bit more vampirism use on Necromancers. Life Siphon, which is the skill 2 on Dagger main hand. The base healing is up by 25%, and now it scales 75% harder with healing power, which should be pretty cool. There's an example of really smart balance, in my opinion, going on with Ranger. Obviously, everyone is using longbow rangers at the moment in the game. Well, to address this, they're not simply reverting the changes they had previously made. They're just looking at one of the really annoying things about longbow rangers and adding a bit more of a tell to it, making it something you can counterplay with just a bit of skill for yourself, dodging at the right time. So the point blank shot, which previously they'd just flick off, it looked like any other projectile, This now has a warm-up, and the color of the projectile is even different, so you know to dodge it a little bit better. I think that's really smart balance, and it brings them into line slightly more. There's been cooldown drops for thieves on their venoms, more incentives to use venoms. They're just relentlessly coming. Hopefully any day now they will be more worthwhile using. And warrior, they announced this change, and a lot of people said, what the hell are ArenaNet talking about? They said that they were buffing mace offhand for warrior because nobody uses it. And everyone said, what the hell are you talking about? Most warriors in PvE use mace offhand. And that's true, but you have to remember these balance changes are done for PvP. And so something that was already very powerful in PvE has got even more stronger. The crushing blow, namely the skill 4, used to apply 4 vulnerability. It's now all the way up to 10. And this is so they can incentivize its use in PvP rather than PvE. So that's pretty much it for generic patch notes. There were a couple of minor changes to like a point of interest location in ore. Let's look at the gemstore. In the gemstore, we can buy now a mini Belinda Delacroix. There is a new back piece you can get, which is a talking Jumbotron replica. Should be interesting. And they have finally changed the silver-fed salvage-o-matic. This thing was ludicrous before. The idea is it's an everlasting salvage kit, basically, that just takes money out of your inventory each time you use it. And it was priced at a silver per salvage before, which was just obscene. It was not worth using ever. I wonder how they ever even released it in that state. Now it's down to 60 copper, which is much more viable, and I believe people will actually start to use it now. So that's fantastic. I wonder if they were doing some kind of weird experiment with the gemstore at that time. Who knows? Otherwise, it's just another example of them being perhaps a little bit out of touch. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's the patch in a nutshell. I would very much encourage you to check out my tour of the Silverwastes if you want to see more footage of it. I am uploading in 1080p 60 frames per second. You won't get to see the 60 frames per second unless you're using Google Chrome at the moment, which sucks. But if you do want to check out that map in all of its glory, I strongly encourage you to. Otherwise, I guess I'll see you guys a little bit later in the week when we talk about what happened in the story, and I can actually give you guys some spoilers. Until then, have fun with the patch, and I guess I'll see you in there. Have a good day, guys.